I bought the Inside Tracker blood uploads subscription, you could say, because it is a subscription that costs about ranging from 100 to maybe $150 or euros in a given year. Now, why did I buy this specifically? Because I live in a country that is not the US, so therefore I could not get the plans which would include the blood draw. Now, what is Inside Tracker? It is basically a company that analyzes your blood data, so the different parameters you can get checked, and then says, okay, in this area you are healthy like this. So in terms of cognition, for example, you could do this, and we give you this recommendation: maybe eat more nuts, maybe you need to include interval workouts, because Garmin or Apple Health tells us that you have this resting heart rate and therefore you need to do this. So I purchased the plan because I had a health issue and I needed, in my eyes, a software. Maybe this was also just the quick fix search, the search for the quick fix, but I needed, in my eyes, something to interpret the data that was given to me. I couldn't get an overview of all the different things that were checked, and I also had to translate in between the languages, which also seems to have caused some issue or some trouble or a lot of work, let's just say. I put a lot of hours then in the last years already into scanning all of my blood work and also all other medical documents, and then I got out all of the different blood panels I made over the years. And to be fortunate, I have first of all the collections of all of these, and second of all I was able to then tease them out, and I also have a few, and then I input them all into Inside Tracker. Now, Inside Tracker is not really meant for this specifically. What Inside Tracker is much more meant for is that you purchase a plan and then you get a blood draw, and within this blood draw you then determine basically your baseline. But what you can also do, and this is what I've mostly used till now, is that you can upload up to 30 previous blood results. Now, this is per year, and as this is a subscription, mostly now I'm talking about the blood panel upload, you then would have to renew it every single year. So that's about $10 or euros a month if you just keep continuing to want to upload your blood data. Now, if you are in the US or in Canada, you then can get the whole packages, which also include the phlebotomist coming to your apartment maybe in certain areas. In others, you can go to a doctor or somewhere where they take your blood, and then it gets analyzed and then it gets sent to Inside Tracker. In my country, I had to kind of do this on my own. So at least where I live, how it then works, I also asked Inside Tracker if they cooperate with any laboratories, but they don't. And also the laboratories seem to not be digitalized in any major way, at least in terms of basically laboratory to customer contact point. They send the data digitally usually, or it's at least seems this way, to the doctor's office, and then the doctor tells you, okay, you have this value in terms of this parameter and this value in terms of this parameter. But what I do not have is an interpretation. I can get the interpretation, which is then printed on a black and white paper, and it shows me 2 lines, and it's like here. And the question then is, how do these different things find together? And the question also is this specifically for me? Is a resting heart rate of 46 or 52, for example, optimal for me? Or a blood pressure, is this optimal for me? Or a blood glucose level at the point at which the blood draw happened, is this optimal for me? Or is it maybe optimal for somebody who has diabetes? Now, the problem, obviously, medicine has, to a certain extent, not very obviously. I want to just state this, and this is much more a conclusion of a few of the recent things I've read and consumed, maybe also of Peter Attia's Outlived, is that it is basically a medicine that is still basically an old version of medicine that is not really updated to what it could be already. And because medicine, maybe, that's just now kind of my personal view, maybe because medicine is not very individualized, it has to cover a broad range, and as there are variations in blood pressure, maybe somebody who is, it could, for example, be that BMI is in athletes very high or in people that are very muscular, and therefore it does not really work as a measure of obesity. But then in other populations it would work because the population is more average. So therefore the muscle mass is not that high, so therefore it couldn't be muscle that contributes to the higher body weight, and it's probably more fat. Now, therefore, individualizing what a parameter means to an individual person is kind of the idea behind InsideTracker. So apart from the normal range, it also gives you an optimized zone. That's kind of the main idea. This gives you a little bit more insight into what the different blood parameters mean. So in terms of the liver, this could be ALT, this could be AST, this could be GGT, for example, and all of these have then meanings, and these meanings have words attached to them, which I didn't really understand, and most people probably also don't understand, and InsideTracker then provides very short explanations. Now, as of the last weeks, as I have tested this, they actually updated the website to an extent that now also includes, or they updated it and it also now includes the recommendations. Previously they were, I think, only in the app. I also experienced a lot of bugs in the app, and for the money I paid for it, or at least for my expectation, they didn't really deliver in terms of the software experience, at least in my view. I also saw it already, I watched other reviews, but there are just not really alternatives to this software. So I was faced with this issue. I wanted to have a solution. I needed just more insight into this topic, and I needed to kind of solve this issue. And the issue usually, at least in the approach of acting rational, which I try to approach in various situations which I am encountered with, it seems to be reasonable to just, first of all, collect a little bit of data, then to maybe get a data interpretation from maybe an external company or maybe from a doctor who then tells me with 10 years, 20 years of experience, okay, this is what you actually need to do. But yeah, for this reason I got mostly InsideTracker. Now, a short downside to InsideTracker is that you cannot really put in all of your blood work. So if you have, for example, tests for specific viruses and things like this, then you cannot put this data into InsideTracker. So it's not really a blood panel tracker per se, but what it is much more is it just takes their selected parameters, which you can also get tested if you're living in the US. And if you are not living in the US, you might not have all of these tested or get tested. So at the laboratory my doctor's office works with, for example, I could get something that is C-reactive protein in a high sensitivity, basically. So there are two different versions, the normal version and the high sensitivity version. And this is a test for inflammation. And then I could get the normal version. I think I didn't find it already on the sheet. But then what I found is that there was an additional parameter website from the laboratory in which the HS or HS CRP was listed. And so I did find this, but for example, ApoB, which Peter Attia, a doctor focused on longevity and on health span and lifespan, also talks a lot about, I cannot get checked. At least I couldn't find any option to get it checked. Maybe if I write to 10 different laboratories, I could, but well, this already makes the process quite difficult. In terms of what you have to expect in terms of price. So I am living in a European country which has euros as its currency. And so now there are different things you can basically put into InsideTracker. For the BioAge calculation, which is called InsideAge 2.0 at this point in time, you need at least a few biomarkers. Usually it's called biomarkers and not parameters. So if you then have a few of these biomarkers, then the InsideAge calculation works. So this could be HB1AC or HbA1c, I think it is called, and then something else and something else and something else, or it could be a different set of parameters. Now, what the InsideAge blood plan, I think I saw this yesterday, then actually includes kind of all the parameters which then contribute to InsideAge, but you could also get kind of just a partial version of this. There seem to be, at least for men, seem to be 5 different versions of this. This is kind of if you want to get InsideAge. The InsideAge calculation also is an additional payment, which you then have to also renew with every inside age calculation you want to get. So it's not kind of automatically included in the blood plan. Now, there might be a lot of different plans, the ultimate plan, the I don't know plan, but for me it was not relevant anyway, so therefore I'm not really talking about this, and let somebody else talk about different plans that are available in the US with blood draw then. I calculated, for example, that I could get the one which also measures the HbA1c and a few other parameters for about 25 euros. That would be the cost of just the different parameters, plus 10 euros for the blood draw at my doctor's office, which seems to not take any additional fees apart from the blood draw fee. So with this, I calculated I would pay around 35 for kind of the cheapest inside age calculation, not necessarily the cheapest, but the one I could get, because I previously thought I could not get the HS CRP, but I was interested in the HbA1c anyway, which is the kind of long-term blood sugar. It's a parameter that tells you something about long-term blood sugar values, and according to my doctor, it seems to be, in terms of its latency, about the last 3 months. And because I was interested in this anyway, I opted for this. I didn't have the blood draw yet, but I did upload all the other results already, so therefore I have quite a little bit of data in Inside Tracker already, and also a little bit of data in terms of the different zones. So sometimes it's like in the optimized zone, sometimes it is not. I also got a few recommendations, and you get, at least in my case, the option to, and this is not just in my case, you get the option to choose a goal. This could be that you want to reduce your inside age, basically reducing biological age, which more and more, as I am consuming content about this, seems to be a very reasonable approach to a very reasonable goal to align basically all of your different things you're trying to do with health and fitness and nutrition and so on and so forth. Just optimizing for this one goal of basically being biologically younger. Brian Johnson, for example, tech CEO, also talks about this now online more and more, and he is currently, at least according to himself, aging at a speed of 0.76, which means he has about 3 months every year in which he doesn't age. Of course, he doesn't really, but infinitely small, he ages basically at 3 of 4 quarters, which seems to be reasonable. This means he doesn't get as old as others would in the same amount of time. Then again, the comparison with the 1 year. Now, you could choose this goal. I opted for strength and power, impartial, because I thought this would be more reasonable, and maybe the longevity goal, I didn't really trust this, despite the focus of mine on longevity, kind of, but I want to focus kind of on more on intensity and power, on strength and power as a goal, so I chose this one. Then it gives you about 30 recommendations, maybe it's 29 recommendations, maybe it's another number. Out of these recommendations, you can then choose. And you can then choose the recommendations either based on impact, so some recommendations might have a 10 impact, some might have a 6.4, for example. Then you choose these, and then it is basically a habit tracker. So it might either track these habits automatically, so this could be get 7 to 9 hours of sleep was one of my recommendations, and it then took my Garmin sleep data, but because I have a 6S Pro, maybe the newer watches would have a better sensor, I don't know exactly. The sleep data is off all the time, and so I don't really know how to resolve this issue, because if the input data is kind of corrupt, and I know that it is because sometimes it just doesn't record any sleep, well, what are the recommendations then worth? And also the kind of things Garmin spits out. But this data then, from at least my Android Garmin based perspective, goes into Inside Tracker. It apparently also works with Apple Health, but I have not tested this, nor have I seen anything, because the Android app obviously doesn't work with Apple. At least it seems reasonable that it doesn't. Now, you get basically the Garmin sleep data, you get Garmin resting heart rate, which it also shows you in an optimized zone. I currently have around 54 for the last 7 days, which seems to be on the upper end of the optimized zone. So it would be better if it was kind of more in the middle towards the lower end, so maybe at 40, for example. And in the last years, because I have tracked my resting heart rate at least for years now, I know that it has been about 32 at times, at least for a given day, or I think almost a week, for example, it was at 32, 34. So 54 now is definitely worse. And it also was very useful, I think, to have this graph, to just know it's not like just athletes and then you look on. Recently I looked onto the Whoop site and then it lists like athletes and the best age range like 47. And this is just way off from the thing you probably could achieve. So the record for a resting heart rate is 27 that was measured in someone. Now, out of these recommendations, I don't really know what to make of. I recently updated again, so I had a new blood test, the one before the Inside Age test I have scheduled. And the Inside Age test doesn't cost that much. If I would test all the 48 biomarkers that Inside Tracker would basically allow, then it would cost me around 280 euros or 290 euros, which is still about 1/3 of the price Inside Tracker takes. But it also, I have to additionally pay the Inside Tracker fees for the Inside Age and also the blood upload, which again is a yearly fee, so it's basically a subscription. Now, I only will get the Inside Age with kind of the minimum amount of biomarkers tested, and out of the recent blood data I inputted, I got new recommendations, and in these new recommendations was, for example, take creatine. And there's also kind of a health review or a health assessment in the beginning where you can input how much activity you do, and this is then updated again from the watch, but in the beginning you have to, I did calculate this, I was like, okay, I do this many hours in a given week and I train probably around 30 minutes on a given day and then this much. Maybe if you leave it blank in the beginning or don't fill out anything and then just take the data from your health tracker, it would be a little bit more useful or a little bit faster, I don't exactly know. There is also a sheet in which you can fill out all the different supplements you can take. And just somebody or something that takes into account all of the different things you do, like either from Garmin and it knows your resting heart rate, it also knows your heart rate zones, probably. It also then knows your recent blood work, which seems to be a reasonable approach to kind of get an inside view into the body. You might have wondered why the light just went out. It's because it's 12, it's basically midnight, and I have these smart bulbs automatically scheduled to turn off in order to make me sleep, basically. But I think I will finish this. So you have these different recommendations, and I actually forgot that you could choose these recommendations. So out of all the 30 recommendations, you can then pick as many as you like. But of course, the ones with the highest impact probably have the highest impact. So with my specific issue, I, for example, could then see a seemingly large language model generated, or AI generated, to be a little bit shorter, version that was sometimes based, I think, on pre-written text, but sometimes it also took into account like what my input data actually was. So I then said like blank was this long and therefore you need to do this, or continue to get about 20 minutes of sunshine because it helps your testosterone, which was not that high. So in order to get this higher, do this. Also try to do even more strength training and work out even more intensely, because this also seems to get your testosterone higher. And here is the study. And something as practical as this, which seems to include all the different aspects of what I put in. Also, if I take creatine or not, I can say, okay, I take creatine and it's 2.5 or 2 to 5 grams, for example. I also take curcumin. I currently don't take it, but I can also input this into Inside Tracker. And it, for example, I think 2 days ago said that I should stop taking my multivitamin based on the recent blood test I put in, because some levels seem to be high and they seem to be high just because of the multivitamin. So stopping the multivitamin is something I could never have figured out on my own, probably, that this was useful based on my levels. I could have guessed, I could have listened to all of the Huberman Lab episodes, which I already did, but it's still, I mean, I have to condense the information somehow and then take into account all the different various aspects, and then if my resting heart rate is like this and my HRV is like this, of course it doesn't take into account HRV as of currently, but maybe in the future it does. It probably does, at least if technology is not stopping to advance in this regard. So a system like this, and I personally now view InsideTracker as kind of one of the first prototypes that really does something like this. Brian Johnson, which I mentioned earlier, also tries to probably build a platform like this, which then also includes kind of a nutritional approach which fits into the data. He calls it Blueprint. But InsideTracker seems to be the platform that already exists, and it exists, I think, since 2009. For the many years it exists, it is still maybe not the best product, and it's also fairly expensive, but that's maybe due to the health costs of the US, I don't specifically know. You can also connect your DNA if you get it tested. InsideTracker also now offers their own DNA test, which they say offers more insight. So a little bit more, basically, it offers basically more of targeting towards the information InsideTracker actually needs. You can also connect, as of currently, Ancestry as well as 23andMe, which are two of the biggest DNA companies. And you can then take into account also your DNA, or InsideTracker takes it into account, and it could be, I don't know as of now, and it could be that it says, okay, you should sleep this many hours because based on your DNA you need this many hours, and it seems reasonable that you should do this based on this latest result from your DNA. Of course, you only have to get your DNA checked once, but also many of the companies that get your DNA checked don't check the whole of the genome but only parts of the genome, so this might be also something to consider maybe in the future as DNA tests and also studies around it get more comprehensive. Mostly the DNA tests then have the whole genome, but whole genome testing is also available at a fairly reasonable price already for about $100. You can get it tested, I think. Then you can get this data and then upload it in a future version of InsideTracker or competing health services. I tried previously another health service which is called Heads Up Health, but they seem to not progress the product anymore, so I recently actually got the lifetime version of the product, which is, compared to InsideTracker, cheaper, and it also allows a blood panel tracking. But because of the different units and because blood panels are not standardized internationally, sometimes they are. There is something called international units, which is kind of just a made-up unit they agreed upon, and then this can be kind of not combined, but compared among different languages and sheets of results. So I used actually the blood panel upload in my language, which then InsideTracker automatically and also per reviewer put into InsideTracker, which I then used in order to put all of my blood data, at least also, into Heads Up Health. In Heads Up Health, for example, I can see my VO2 max from Garmin, I can see how much relative effort I put into Strava, but these metrics, even though the integrations exist, are kind of just random metrics, at least it seems to me, and I cannot do anything about this. I cannot say, okay, I want this from Strava and this from Strava, but these seem to be kind of fixed and I don't really know what to do about this. They also had an app at one point in time, but the app seems to just be closed down and not exist any longer. I also asked a few times about various integrations and about the app, and they said it will come back, but it has been months now. So I don't have much hope for Heads Up Health. Maybe Brian Johnson tries something very similar to InsideTracker with Blueprint. So kind of maybe a bigger idea would be, so the best plan you can get from InsideTracker would cost about $2,000, at least in the US, and it would basically do all of the different parameters or biomarkers InsideTracker says, it's about 48, every 3 months, so basically every quarter. And then you could actually see if the improvements you made or if their recommendations actually resulted in any improvements. But without this, doing InsideTracker once, it is not probably that useful because then you change something. But if you don't pay an additional $700, $800 for the next test, then you cannot really do much about this because you don't know what the recommendations resulted in. So therefore, it would be probably more useful if it combined even more of the different parameters, and it also does a little bit more already. So for example, it seems to also get my sleep from Garmin, and then it tells me, okay, your deep sleep is not optimized. It's at 18% because you didn't sleep well the last night or the last 7 nights, for example. So including more markers that are not specifically blood markers, and maybe moving away from just focusing on blood, but more on a generalized health optimization approach would be more useful. But so far, this has been my experience and perspective on Insight Tracker, mostly on the blood panel upload.